Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Stacy if you're new here. Today I am gonna give you all the tips and tricks that I have learned over the years from backpacking. I've probably been backpacking for about, 5 years. I've been backpacking in the summers. I've done overnight trips. I've done up to 4 or 5 night trips. And I want to share all of the tips and things that I wish that I knew when I first started backpacking. Tip number 1 is going to be pick an easy trail, do some research, and decide what trail is going to be the best for your first trip. Look at trails within your community, somewhere close to you. You don't have to drive too far. Whenever I research trails, I use the AllTrails app, and it gives you the difficulty level, the distance, whether it's a loop or an out and back trail, the amount of elevation gain, other users' photos of the trail, other users' reviews. So maybe if a section has been washed out or there's a ton of fallen trees, or right now, one of my favorite reviews is whether or not there's access to get in whatever body of water that is nearby. So right now I've been looking at a lot of trails with rivers, and if there's good river access and the river's not like rushing too much that it's unsafe to actually swim. And that's kind of things that I've been looking at recently. And a lot of users will put that in their reviews if it's important to them as well. The premium version of the AllTrails app will allow you to download the trail so you can use it for navigation for offline use, which I use all the time. I think it's such a helpful tool to make sure that you're staying on the trail. You can kind of see what type of elevation is coming, like a elevation gain, so you can plan your day out, especially if you're doing a longer trip. You can kind of look at it and be like, all right, I know that going up is going to be more difficult than going down, which is true for most people. So I'm gonna plan for this part of the trail to take X amount of time, whereas I can make up that time if needed if you're on a time crunch. But like on a straight part, a flat part, you can make up the time that you might have taken extra time to then go up in elevation if the trail has those types of difficulties. So I really love AllTrails for planning my trip, and if you use the link down in the description box to sign up, AllTrails is taking 1% of all memberships to protect wildlife areas. They are planting a tree for new user signups who sign up through my link, as well as one for me. So like 2 trees per sign up through my referral link. And they are also a Leave No Trace partner. I absolutely love everything that AllTrails stands for. Yeah, I actually earn no commissions. It's just a referral link. They just do all of those wonderful things for our environment for every new member. So you can sign up and then you can refer other people, and they continue to just help our environment. After kind of doing my initial research with AllTrails, I then go into Google and I do some more research. So once I've kind of narrowed down, especially if I'm debating between a couple of different trails, I look at how close they are to where I live and how far I'm willing to drive to do that. For a beginner, you definitely want to pick someplace close so that you're not driving for hours and hours. You get there and it's already hours into your day. You didn't account for that drive time, and then you have to think about how far you need to hike to get back, and then how that drive time back, and all of those logistics. So those are definitely things that you need to consider when choosing your first backpacking trail. Other things that I look at is whether there's a water source nearby. So if there's any reported dry stretches, to make sure that you have enough water carrying vessels on you, like a water bladder or liter water bottles or whatever you choose to carry. Make sure you have enough of those in the event that you do need to carry extra water, or you just choose that's not the trail for your first backpacking trip, which I would advise that a trail with long stretches of dry areas on that trail is not a suitable trail for a beginner backpacker. But if you're going with someone who has a little bit more experience, then absolutely could be an option in that event. But if you are just brand new to backpacking, not sure if that's the first trail for you, but you know your own limits, so make your own decisions. And then the next thing I look for is what the weather is typically like during the day and at night. At night specifically, because I sleep cold, and so I need to know if I need extra layers or whatever else I may need. And then another thing that I look for is if there is a ton of tree cover, so how much sun protection you're going to have to need to bring, whether you're going to just use it with all your clothing, so wear long pants or leggings, a long sleeve shirt that's lightweight, even if it's warm. Sometimes the trade-off of not having to reapply sunscreen a million times is better than having, like, being just a little bit sweaty and on the warm side. It just depends on your personal preference. So those are things that I think about. And then what type of conditions have been reported on the trail? Are there different obstructions, like a fallen tree, or maybe there was rainy recently and it's super muddy? Another thing to research while deciding what trail to do is the safety of it. So how well traveled is that trail? Are you going to come across anybody often? Do other people travel the trail, whatever it may be? In the event of like an emergency, if you're not going to come across people, the likelihood of someone passing you is lower if the trail is not well traveled. And another thing that comes with the safety is, are there any areas of the trail that might be closed due to wilderness fires or other natural events, excessive rain or mudslides or anything like that? And then another thing you want to look at is if there's any fire restrictions in your area. So if you were planning on making a fire or anything like that while, like when you go set up camp after a long day of hiking, which is also a lot of fun, you just have to consider whether or not your area has fire restrictions due to increased wildfire danger. And typically, like, a camp stove doesn't really count towards a fire restriction, just like setting up in open fire does. You want to be aware if there's any cell service available on the trail. My next tip is backpacking gear. This one can go into a ton of depths. We can talk about backpacking gear forever. The basics of backpacking gear is you're gonna need some type of shelter, a lightweight tent, a backpack, a sleeping bag, a sleeping pad, a backpacking stove and fuel canister, a water filter, and some type of kitchen supplies, eating utensils, bowls, whatever it is that you choose to carry. So I'm gonna quickly go over all of these because I feel like the gear alone, because I'm gonna do a separate video of all of my specific gear that I have that I bring with me when I go on my next backpacking trip coming up soon. So look out for that video. For a tent, most people will split up a 2-person tent between 2 people to kind of distribute the weight between them. I have more recently I've been using a hammock, which was a lot of fun, so I'll probably continue to use a hammock. So that's another option, but it's not necessarily a beginner-friendly option. But whatever type of shelter you pick, absolutely make sure you know how to set it up before you go. Probably the most important thing is your backpack. There are many different ways, different avenues in which you can purchase or borrow or thrift or rent backpacking gear. So as a beginner, it might be in your best interest to rent the big gear, the tent, sleeping bag, pad, maybe backpack, just so you kind of have an idea of whether or not you even like going backpacking. You can get gently used gear from like Facebook Marketplace, Out and Back Outdoor, Gear Trade, or even like REI sells used gear as well. So I actually didn't think about any of those types of options when I started backpacking, so I bought a lot of gear, trial and error, decided the things that I don't like, I do like. I've donated a bunch of stuff I didn't like. Yeah, I wish I had thought about thrifting or renting or anything like that, buying used gear a lot sooner. One thing though, I got my backpack, which is an Osprey brand, and it's lasted me, and it's almost in like perfect condition. It might be like dirty, but like there's almost no wear or tear. From the last 5 seasons, I've done like 3 to 5 backpacking trips each summer, ranging from a 1-nighter to like a 5-nighter, just depending on the trip that we decided to take. And it's lasted me that long, so whenever you do decide that backpacking is something that you enjoy, I highly recommend investing in a quality backpack. The next big item is a sleeping bag. There's a ton of options available. You can choose a down-filled sleeping bag or a synthetic sleeping bag. The down-fill ones are going to be a lot more expensive, but they are going to be like the lightest on the market. So it just depends on what you want to choose. If you're going for the first time, maybe this is an item you rent. I personally have a sleeping bag that I think is a synthetic fill, just because that hasn't been an item that I want to invest in right now. One day I want to do the full Colorado Trail through hike, but so at that time I will probably invest in like a down sleeping bag or something like that, because that's going to be a several week long hike. Sleeping bags, you just want to keep in mind what the cold rating is. So if it's like a -degree bag and you sleep hot, like that might not be the best option for you unless you're going to be camping in the winter, which as a beginner I don't recommend backpacking in the winter. So for me, I choose a somewhat colder bag, maybe like a 30-degree bag, and then with my clothing, and I'll sleep in a bunch of different layers because I sleep cold. So that way, if I do get hot, which usually doesn't happen, I can take off some layers. So the next big thing is going to be your sleeping pad. So a sleeping pad basically provides some cushion on the ground. You sleep on top of it, and some insulation from the ground. So like a lot of times, especially if you're gonna be hiking in the mountains or some type of high country, it's a lot colder than like it would be at lower temperatures, and the ground still gets cold at night as well. And then like in a hammock, it provides some insulation under you because your entire underside is exposed. And then the next thing is a stove, and oftentimes they're like very small, compact. You hook them to a fuel canister and they are super lightweight. You can get a cheap one on Amazon. That's what I started with, and then you can just upgrade from there. They're not expensive at all, but they're very important so you can cook food, basically. And the next big item is a water filter. There's so many different ones on the market. I have used the Sawyer Squeeze for years and years, and it has served me very well. I think it's on its like last bit of life. Like I had to clean it out very thoroughly the last time I did it, and it's still working great. But I'm looking at other options, and yeah, the Sawyer Squeeze is definitely a very beginner friendly option. And then kitchen supplies, basically you're looking at your like whatever you're going to cook your food in, whatever you're going to eat with, utensils. I pretty much just use a titanium cup and a long-handled spork. That's it. That's my entire kitchen supplies essentially. Titanium is super lightweight and it cools very quickly, so you don't have to worry about waiting forever for it to cool to put it back in your pack. So I love doing that, and I solely basically rehydrating meals, so I just have to boil water, put it in the bag, and let it do its thing, and then eat straight out of the bag. So I have almost no cleanup and easy, like almost no waste on the ground, that kind of thing. So like when you're like cleaning out a dirty pot and then rinsing it, you're ending up with remnants of food on the ground, and I just don't like doing that. But also, I'm lazy when it comes to, not lazy, I would like to take the easy route when it comes to backpacking. So a lot of dehydrated and freeze-dried meals are actually pretty dang good. So the next important thing is to like decide what you're going to be wearing while backpacking. You just need to think about like what are your base layers, long pants, long sleeve shirt, that kind of thing, so that you can sleep in that. whatever you're gonna hike in, and then anything you might have for an insulated layer and some like rainwear. So here's what I pretty much wear. Depending on the trail, if there's a ton of tree cover, I usually hike in shorts and a t-shirt, and then I have a long sleeve shirt easily accessible in my pack that I can just toss on real quick if I do get chilly, if there's like a bit of a breeze, because I tend to get cold a little bit quickly, and that way I just have it real quick. I could put it on. And then if for whatever reason we're on a trail that's gonna have a lot of sun exposure, I'll wear long pants and long sleeve shirt because I burn so easily and I don't want to have to think about stopping every hour to reapply sunscreen, especially when I just want to continue on the trail. So those are just a couple of things to think about when you decide what you're wearing. And then as for what I sleep in long leggings and fleece pants or some type of like sweatpants. Sometimes the long pants that I wore on the trail, depending on what type of trail we're on, and a t-shirt and long sleeve shirt and a puffer jacket and a beanie, a knitted hat. And sometimes if it's even like I get even more chilly, I'll put on my rain jacket for an added layer, but I just like to wear layers so that if I do get warm, I can take them off. It really is a personal preference in terms of like what you wear, and then the material that you choose for your hiking clothes is very important. It has to quickly dry and kind of be like lightweight, especially if you're packing out some stuff, because like if it's a cotton material, cotton takes forever to dry. It gets heavy when it's wet. So it's just not recommended to wear any type of cotton while you're backpacking. And then especially if all of your clothes get wet and even your sleep clothes, everything, it could potentially put you in a dangerous situation if all of your layers are soaking wet and still wet by the time you go to sleep. Another tip that I have is for socks. So I typically will bring 2 pairs of socks. It doesn't matter what even like length of backpacking trip. Occasionally I'll bring one extra, but oftentimes it'll only be 2 pairs. I'll have one that I sleep in, one that I hike in, and so at night I'll switch out to my sleeping socks and then allow my hiking socks to just hang out and kind of dry and air out overnight while I sleep. And if you get activewear style or even wool socks, like Smart Wool is a great brand. They make a lot of lightweight socks that dry quickly and not hold on to a ton of odors. If you're swapping between the two, you'll always have an extra pair, and you'll always have a mildly clean pair of socks while you backpack. It's not uncommon for backpackers to rewear clothing items for their trip. So the next thing is going to be like what shoes that you're going to wear. The biggest thing is deciding between a hiking boot with a higher ankle support area or like a trail runner that's going to come down more like a tennis shoe. It really is all up to personal preference. I recommend just going to one of your local like outdoor shops and see if they have someone who can like measure your feet and get you fitted for a hiking boot that suits your needs, your personal taste, your comfort, because getting a quality hiking boot is going to be crucial to the comfort of your entire backpacking trip. I have all of these tips and tricks and a complete backpacking list on my website. I'll link it down below so you can check it out and download the checklist if you want to. Tip number 3 is food. So backpacking food looks a lot different compared to other like traditional camping food where you can bring a cooler and more perishable items, whereas backpacking, you're not going to have the luxury of carrying a cooler on your back because you're going to be hiking all day. You don't want to carry a ton of weight. Some people do, but I don't. I want it as light as I possibly can. So I look for either freeze-dried or dehydrated meals. A lot of the pre-packaged freeze-dried meals that you can find in outdoor stores or even Walmart are a little bit more pricey. So if you're trying to do it on a budget, I like to pick any like pre-packaged pasta, rice kind of meals, like those Knorr sides, or even mac and cheese, boxed mac and cheese, and like pair it with some chicken in like those little foil packs, kind of like how tuna comes in. Even like tuna is a great option if you like tuna. Or you could bring little smokies, those little tiny sausages, and just kind of get creative with how you do those meals, because those meals will rehydrate well and they're lightweight to put in your pack. Instant ramen is a perfect one, especially because throughout the day you're going to be sweating and whatever, so the added sodium that's in ramen naturally, like because it's already high in sodium, will be a wonderful addition to replenish the sodium that you're going to lose through your sweat. And then as for like different snacks, you can bring like protein bars, trail mix. I like to bring candy, like gummy candy, gummy worms. That's one of my favorite, like quick little energy. So if I'm like feeling really sluggish, eat a couple of those. Quick energy, easy to digest. And a lot of people like to bring beef jerky. It's expensive, so I don't always bring beef jerky. So, and then for breakfast, some people are satisfied with some breakfast bars, protein bars for breakfast. I like to bring some oatmeal or some granola or cereal that I've mixed with some powdered milk in a freezer bag. And overnight the water tends to get pretty dang cold, which is nice. So then you just pour enough and basically you get a cereal and milk kind of situation. That actually turns out pretty good, surprisingly, with powdered milk. So you just have to be quite creative when it comes to backpacking meals. Again, I'll have this in more detail in my upcoming video about everything that I pack in my pack when I do go for my next backpacking trip. Lastly, when it comes to food, you have to consider what type of wildlife is going to be in the area. So how are you going to store your food? I live in the Rocky Mountains and it is bear country through and through. And it is basically required to have a bear canister. You have to store your food in like a airtight sealed canister and store it a little bit of ways away from where you actually set up your tent, just as like a safety precaution. I have a whole blog post about bear safety. I'll link that below. Tip number 4 is getting ready for the trip. There's a couple of things you just need to kind of get yourself ready to go to be able to go on this trip safely. You want to get yourself physically ready, so essentially just do a couple of day hikes nearby. Maybe do a couple day hikes with your base weight of your pack. So your base weight should be anywhere from like 20% of your body weight. Hold on, that's actually 20, it's usually 20% full pack, so that's with food and water. Base weight is all of your gear without food and water, so you kind of just want to think about roughly, I don't know, 30 pounds minimum, gonna be kind of what you'll be wearing for your backpacking trip. So maybe do a few day hikes with a full pack, even if you're not gonna do a complete overnight trip. Make sure that you know how all of your gear works. Set up your tent, make sure your sleeping pad doesn't have any holes in it, make sure you know how your backpack feels, make sure it fits well, make sure it's adjusted properly, make sure your water filter is clean and works, make sure that your stove is working, you have enough fuel in your canister, make sure that you are comfortable starting a fire in the event that an emergency happens and you have to stay warm. Hopefully none of those situations happen. It's always great to be prepared for that type of situation. Figure out logistics. So how are you getting to the trail? Do you need any type of permits to be on this trail? There are a lot of places that do require types of permits to backpack in the wilderness around trails. Make sure you know what fire restrictions are in your area. Oftentimes, to find this type of information, you can look up the National Forest websites. Make sure a family member at home knows your itinerary. Kind of give them an idea of when you'll be back, how long you should be gone. That way, if they don't hear from you, you have somebody who can kind of be like, all right, this person's supposed to be back by now. We need to alert for help. And it's always just good for a family member to like know where you're at. And then make sure you are fully packed days in advance. Do not pack the night before. Make sure that your backpack fits nicely with your gear in it. If you need to shift things around so that the weight is distributed properly, or whatever it may be. The last tip, number 5, is leave no trace. So this is probably one of the most important ones, hands down. Basically, leave no trace is just leave the wilderness area better than you found it. Do not leave any trash. If you create trash, which you will while you're backpacking, make sure you are packing it out and taking it with you. Do not camp within 200 feet of any type of water source. That is, I think, I don't know if it's a law, but it's definitely a major regulation, I guess, if you will. Do not use the restroom within 200 feet of a water source. And you should dig a 6 to 8 inch hole to bury any waste. And my tip for that is do not wait until it's an emergency. Not talking from experience or anything, but don't wait till it's an emergency so you have time to dig a 6 to 8 inch hole. I have a trowel that's roughly that big that I use to dig, and I use it to measure the depth of the hole. Don't wait until it's an emergency. Just go when you have the feeling, so you have time to dig that hole and you're able to practice leave no trace, like best practices. And lastly, if you come across any trash along the way, don't leave it. I mean, I know that there's circumstances in which like there's absolutely no way you're going to carry all of the trash you find, but like little wrappers, bits and pieces, stuff that you can fit in your pack, just try to leave it better than you found it. All right, so that's going to conclude the beginner tips that I have for backpacking. Like I said, I'm going to have a full complete video on the gear that I use in an upcoming video, so look out for that. And also the food. I'll do the gear and food that I'm bringing all in one video together. And I hope this helps. I hope that you consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. I post a lot of lifestyle and fitness content and outdoorsy stuff and kind of a variety of different things, just talking about all my different interests. I really like plants and Disney and crocheting and other crafty things and being outside and just many different hobbies that I enjoy, and I just want to bring you guys along with me as I do all the things. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.